Welcome, everyone. Thank you for joining us today. My name is Jean Varney, and I'm the Deputy Area Chair for Operations, Technology, and Information, and a Senior Lecturer at the Nolan School of Hotel Administration in the S.C. Johnson College of Business at Cornell University. I'd like to welcome you to the International Luxury Hotel Association's webinar on Can Sustainability Be Profitable for Hotels? Today's webinar is brought to you by ILHA Cosmetics, and I'd like to introduce our speakers to you. Ron Paul, who's the president of World Hotels. Brett Campbell, who is a sustainability consultant. Hans Fearns, who is the managing director and president of North America for ILHA Cosmetics. And Heidi Veersman, who is the general manager at ILHA Napa Valley. So let's get started with our discussion. All right, so can sustainability be profitable for hotels? So some people have the perception that hotels, for them to try to incorporate sustainability into their operations, it will cost them more money. So Ron, at World Hotels, can you tell us some things or speak a little bit about the initiatives that you have within your proprietary Earth People Community program that either won't cost the hotel operations more money or that could even possibly save money at your luxury properties?
Absolutely, and thank you, Jean. You know, I think now more than ever, hotels can save money by implementing practices, sustainability practices. You know, for a long time in the industry, most things did cost more to implement. And aside from costing more to implement, it was also something that was not necessarily recognized by consumers. So we were forcing guests to do something that they might not feel a benefit or value to. So we've seen a complete shift in the adoption and acceptance of some of these practices. And the easiest and best example is bulk amenities. You know, bulk amenity dispensers in bathrooms were something that were never really accepted here in the States. It, you know, was first adopted in Europe and then moved to other areas of the world. And now in many states within the United States, they're actually mandated to use bulk amenity dispensers and certainly throughout Canada. So, and consumers, especially the younger generation, the millennials, Gen X, Y, Z, truly look at the practices that hotels have, and you know, bulk amenities at the end of the day save money, and they're a great value, and allow for us to also offer better amenity products than we might have been able to in the smaller bottles, as I'm sure you know Hans will speak to. So to me, that's one of the very first ones. The second one what came out of COVID, quite honestly, and that's housekeeping service upon request. You know, we just assume that every guest wants their room cleaned every day, and that's a practice that we've had in the industry since I began in the business, and in the luxury segment, oftentimes multiple times a day. So taking a more assertive effort at check-in, talking to guests to really understand, is this something they want or need? And at World Hotels, what we've done is ask for the type of service that they would like. You know, it might not be a full clean, but maybe it's a tidy, where we go in and, you know, make the bed, you know, empty the trash, and maybe replace towels if necessary. But laundry is one of the most expensive operations and energy uses within a hotel, that and kitchens. So, so again, customers today recognize the importance that plays, and we certainly ask that, and if they want it, we're happy to provide full service. But it's significant savings from not only, you know, from utilities and everything goes along with that, but labor is the most expensive component of a hotel operation, and it can reduce that significantly. You know, a couple other specific initiatives. You know, we're trying to eliminate bottled water throughout the operation, and bottled water has become less expensive, but unless it's something that guests truly request here in the States, we're trying to remove that. In other parts of the world, we're looking at using cardboard containers versus plastic in the bottled water distribution. And then two other items that I would just share that we look at is motion detectors for in place of light switches, whether it's in offices in the hotel, if it's in storerooms, those things just they add up, and utilities are increasing. They've increased over 30% since the pandemic, and they're never going to come down. So adopting these type of practices have a very short-term return on investment. And then the last one I would share is that using indigenous landscape at your property is very beneficial. And I'm talking today from Phoenix, Arizona. A lot of resorts here tried to put Midwest landscape around their hotels instead of just accepting that we're in a desert and water is important. So use that to your benefit. Customers today want to feel the local feel of where they are, and not try to create something that they're not. So those are the top 3 or 4 things that we've implemented really throughout the brand, with a lot of other initiatives that we've got on the forefront. I guess I'll add one final one, and that is food waste, and that's a global initiative for us. We throw out so much food on a daily basis. It's extremely expensive, but not only that, there's other ways to dispose of that food that can benefit those that may be in need. And really a specific initiative that we've worked through the World Sustainable Hospitality Alliance with the other major brands such as Marriott, Hilton, Accor, as a #1 priority is how can we reduce food waste in what we do in an operation, especially in hotels.
Well, that's fantastic. That was a lot. That was great. You're all doing amazing work, and you're right about the partnerships, working together, sharing best practices, really important. So thank you for all of that. So my next question is for you, Heidi. Another lingering misconception about sustainability in hotels is that it's too difficult and expensive to execute in the luxury tier segment in particular. How would you respond to that, given your work at ILHA Napa Valley?
Thank you very much, Jean. I do think, to Ron's point, that we have that misconception in the hospitality industry, and it comes from probably historically it being quite expensive. There are so many opportunities now where we can measure the ROI, both from an actual dollars and cents standpoint, and actually from a consumer sentiment. And to Ron's point, with the recent data coming out on millennials and Gen Z, and the fact that their decision-making drives is measured. Skift came out with their 2024 report showing that consumers do make decisions with their dollars and oftentimes lean towards sustainability. And so there are some really nice ideas that hotels can use that are pretty easy. Ron mentioned getting rid of plastic bottles, eliminating those completely. Every city in the United States has a different solution for plastic bottles, but really at the beginning is trying to get rid of the plastic to begin with. So there are several companies that have a glass amenity water program. And for our hotel specifically, which is even quite small, 65 rooms, we use only glass water bottles in the guest rooms. And that savings is approximately $25,000 per year, even over a quite inexpensive purchase price right now for individual plastic bottles. And so while there may have been some capitalized expense on the front end for hotels, that can pay itself back fairly quickly and is really one of the biggest noticeable elements of sustainability around the resort, although we have quite a few hidden and back of house programs. That's that's really in front of the guests. So I suggest hotels looking into that. It can be quite a financial benefit as well as to the planet, which all of us on this call care about significantly. So we talked, Ron mentioned bulk amenities, for example. I think there's an ROI for that financially. On both the waste side in terms of the plastics going back into the recycling stream, and also just the usage from the guest. You can afford a much nicer product, which I think some people will touch on here, but that has been found to be, there was previously a little bit of nervousness in hospitality, potentially at the luxury level, that consumers would not be amenable to not being able to take some of those amenities with them. But I think the trade-off that the industry made, which was providing a much nicer product in a larger format to save the plastics, and the story that the industry has been telling has been significant in really changing the way the consumer perceives what we say bulk amenities, but really large format. And I think that's been very well received throughout the luxury brands. So those are just a few. I have a long list, of course, from ROI perspective, but I do think it takes just the hotel looking at what they can do in their own city and their own size, and running the numbers, as well as partnering with some communities. And I can talk a little bit about that later.
Great. Thank you, Heidi. Those are all
You know,
right. Brett.
Gene, I would add to what Heidi just said, and it also allows for upscale properties like Heidi's to offer a retail offering of those same amenities as well, where you have them available in the gift shop, and certainly it's a great opportunity for customers to try a unique product, but then buy it and take it with them.
Yes.
Great point. Absolutely. Thank you. Thank you. All right, Brett. So next I have a question for you. You've done some really amazing transformative work at Nemacolin with really multiple ground up projects. How can hotels balance that initial investment in those eco-friendly practices with really long-term profitability?
Thank you, Gene. Yeah, so absolutely, there are ways to make long-term profitability through your eco-friendly practices. And I think the first thing that really you need to do is that materiality assessment to really see what's important to your stakeholders, whether that be the guests, the associates, the owners, or even the community at large. And I think the next thing that you really have to realize is that, sustainability initiatives compound. You can do a lot of small things that eventually become transformative. So you don't have to do everything all at once. I think that that's another important thing to realize. And then the third thing, as Heidi mentioned, is knowing the resources that you have available at your disposal. So at Nemacolin, with 3,000 acres, and a multitude of that being virgin land and things of that nature, we had a lot of opportunities to create some great eco-friendly practices that created some long-term profitability for the resort. I think lastly, the other thing is that a lot of resorts fall into that problem of just looking at the next quarter, looking at the next year, and they're not looking out 5 years into the future, which puts a lot of the large scale large scale projects at a roadblock because of the initial investment. But if you're able to really create that buy-in through the smaller projects, you're able to get some of those bigger projects over the hump. So, I think that some of the things, as Ron mentioned, I think that addressing your utilities is a great way to really start looking at some ways for long-term profitability. Things as simple as switching out LEDs if you have a large size back of house that is full of CFLs and doesn't have the motion sensors. That's a small investment, especially with the Inflation Reduction Act, the associated rebates that are with LEDs right now. Many of those are point of sale rebates. So you can get those without even having to put in that large initial investment. And then on the back end, you get the operational efficiencies that come along with that to reduce your costs throughout the year. Food waste, as Ron mentioned, another huge one that's pretty easy to address from an initial investment standpoint. Implementing things like Winnow that utilizes artificial intelligence to reduce food waste during the production side. But then also partnering with, we didn't go the same route as Ron has, but we went through another 501c3 called Copia to divert our food waste from a market that we built for our associates. So we were able to divert 30,000 pounds of food waste in about a year to provide about 28,000 meals to local 501c3s. And then, as Heidi mentioned, leaning on other 501c3s or your community to help you implement things is crucial. So we wanted to do on-site honey production. We realized that might be difficult finding a licensed or a knowledgeable apiarist. Additionally, the cost involved with all of that, in addition to hiring someone. So we were able to partner with a 501c3 out of Ohio that actually gives us turnkey beekeeping services for a charitable donation per hive. And then for everything they do for us, from harvesting the honey to giving beekeeping education classes for our associates and for the guests, they also do that all for local schools. So it becomes a double edged sword there, where we're helping the community learn about beekeeping, but also doing that. And it's a very, very low cost for the resort.
Well, again, wonderful initiatives. I love your point about really the long-term view, and some of these decisions for sustainability may not have that immediate return, but like your energy example, some of them have actually very, very quick returns. Thank you. All right, great. Hans, I have a question for you next here. We've definitely seen an increase in legislation, really in a wide variety of areas related to sustainability, and sometimes it can impact profitability. A new regulation on the books is the Modernization of Cosmetics Regulation Act. And for our listeners, can you explain a little bit about it and how it can, and how hotels can effectively comply with this act while maintaining profitability?
Yes, thanks, Jean, for the question. And that act is a mouthful. Most people call it MOCRA. And the best way to view it for hotels, I think, is to view it as a quality guarantee for the amenities that you get in your house. The MOCRA Act is very similar to an act that was passed in the EU about 10 years ago, and it had the following effect. It made sure that people who deliver your amenities to your hotel now increase their quality standards. There's many hotels in the United States that source their amenities from China. And there's nothing bad with that, unless the ingredients do not match the ingredient label. And in 80% of the cases, that is the case. So although you think you have amenities in the bathroom that have a certain quality standards, very often what's in the product is not what's on the product. MOCRA will put a framework into place to actually do something about that. The other thing that MOCRA does is talks about packaging. There are research studies out there that argue that 72% of the amenities in hotel rooms, in hotel bathrooms, are contaminated. Now, many people don't notice this because the guests that stay at your hotel use the products in the shower, go home, and if they have sensitive skin, the red spots on their face only materialize a couple of days after they're home. And they don't put one and one together. And of course, then they don't notice. But the fact is, a lot of amenities in bathrooms are contaminated. And it's because of the product inside. It's also because the pumps don't close correctly. So a lot of the cheap materials in packaging and in ingredients that are being used are not up to snuff. And MOCRA is going to make sure that there's a framework to enforce that the amenity quality goes up. It's exactly what we've seen in Europe. What happened in Europe after a MOCRA type act was implemented is people started to source locally. And that's exactly what will happen here, I suspect. People will start sourcing amenities made in America because those manufacturers actually live up to MOCRA. All of the manufacturers we work with in North America, they have to register with the FDA. They have to register their products with the FDA. And if they don't comply, you can't play. And I think that's a good thing. Now, to the topic, how does this help? Some people have already talked about it. Ron mentioned bulk dispensers. Heidi also mentioned it. Going from small to big bottles is a move in America that's actually very well developed. A lot of hotels have done this logically because you save some money. So this is a typical sustainability project that actually increases your profitability. But now we come to the next step. If you have large amenity dispensers hanging in your bathroom, you need to refill them. So going to refilling is the next step. Now we all know, Brett talked about stakeholders, but he didn't mention housekeeping. Those are the people that actually refill these bottles, of course. It's your room service that Ron also talked about. Give them a little more time to do good room service efficiently by making refilling a little easier. Let's face it, the refilling options that are currently available are a mess. They waste products, they have spillage. If you want to operate these pumps to refill, you get an arm like Arnold Schwarzenegger. It's not always great, let's face it. Moving to automated refilling, where you have zero spillage and can refill a bottle within 6 seconds, saves money. The experience we have in Europe doing this shows that you can save up to 50%, 50%, in amenity spend per stay if you go to automated refilling. So here's a sustainability project that immediately gives you profitability. And I think that is an interesting perspective. And in light of the MOCRA Act, these kind of movements will just help us get better quality amenities throughout the system. Now, on this call, a number of people have talked about water, and I think that is incredibly interesting. With all due respect, the water quality in America, I'm not American, as you've noticed, because of the accent. The water quality in America is not always great, for good reasons. American water companies or the government needs to put a little bit of chemicals in the water because water quantities here are standing around for a long time in warm weather. And then you need a little bit of chemicals to make sure there's no bacteria in it. But it doesn't make the water taste great. And that's why every hotel who wants to give good water to people needs to do something about the water quality. That's why we had plastic bottles with water in our hotels. And now, as Heidi already said, changing that to better water dispensers, to better filtration systems is a really good thing. We know a little bit about that as ILHA. We're part of the largest water technology group in the world called BWT. And we do water systems for hotels. And it's a super interesting topic where also sustainability could be very profitable. But that's for another time. It's a very long and winded answer to your question, but I hope I made that clear.
Yeah, that was wonderful.
If I could ask a question, Hans, when do you see the technology with the refillable dispensers coming to market? The reason I ask is we've actually mandated that hotels do not use refillable dispensers at this point in time because of the potential challenges that you face with refilling, not rewashing the container over a period of time. So I think that's a very interesting and important approach. When do you see that technology coming to market?
We are, thanks for the question. We started implementing this last year in Europe, and we're now bringing it to America. And next week at a show in Miami, we'll show this technology for the first time. So we're all the way at the beginning. We're having our first conversations. There's actually a tiny little machine that does this. And I think the best way to talk about automated refilling is to show it. Because it is a concept, and let's face it, it sounds sort of boring, and it happens somewhere in the bowels of the hotel. Nobody sees it, and the benefits you get to your bottom line. But I think the best way to discover automated refilling is fill a bottle yourself. And that's what we're going to do. So in answer to your question, we're starting next week.
All right, great. Thank you. That was a lot of information. Thank you so much for that exclamation, for explaining it all to us and bringing some of those issues to our awareness. Thank you. All right, so this is open to all panelists here. We'll kind of open up our questions now. And this is somewhat related to the whole issue surrounding packaging. What innovative sustainable packaging solutions are emerging or that you see in the hospitality industry? And how do they impact both guest satisfaction as well as operational costs? Go ahead, Hans. Okay.
Yeah, this is an important question. Now, if you look at recycling rates of amenities amongst hotels in the world, here are some facts. Europe recycles, and I'm saying Europe, it's the EU, whatever, and the numbers are different across. But on the average, a hotel in Europe recycles about 55% of its amenity packaging. China recycles about 17% of its amenity packaging. China. America recycles 5.5%. So it's at the bottom of the pack. And it has a very good reason that American hotels do not recycle their packaging. It's because it's not recyclable, the packaging that most hotels have. Because most hotel dispensers for amenities have several materials in it. Different materials. And if you have a mix of materials, you cannot recycle. You can throw it in a recycling bin, but it doesn't mean that it gets recycled. So monomaterial packaging has been around forever. And the industry, like ourselves, we should adopt it. We should adopt monomaterial dispensers for hotels so that hotels can recycle and that these numbers go to normal levels.
Let's go ahead, Ron. Did you want to say anything? Oh, sorry, Hans. I thought that was very interesting with the packaging comment for the consumables that we have. And then from a hotel operational standpoint too, I think we think about sustainability and that evolution in terms of when we give things to people to go, both from a food and beverage standpoint. I think there has been, at least on the coast and in some of the major cities, some movements towards paying a little bit more for recyclable or compostable packaging when we're giving that to the consumer. And I think also in the guest room, if you think about the guest room experience, when hotels are looking at their single-use plastics as we move towards our long-term goals, at least at Hyatt Hotels Corporation and also at many of the other hotel companies, we have long-term goals to really minimize single-use plastics, which includes Hans's comment about packaging. But we have, if everyone can remember the days of the plastic dry cleaning bags that were in the rooms and some of the plastic slippered bags and some of those things. And as the industry becomes more and more aligned, those products become more affordable, and the data starts to show hotels that switch over, which we've done, to material, which can be washed and used. The life of that material is greatly expanded when we're using it for laundry, for example, or for slippers or other amenities instead of a single-use packaging, and really trying to increase that life of the packaging. Although that's just one of the many solutions, like Hans is talking about, the mono material packaging, also a wonderful solution, so many other ways. But I bring that up because there is some ROI in that when you look at the metrics in terms of how many of those items a guest room will go through in a year versus the single original upfront purchase price.
Yeah, if I may, this is the wonderful exchange. Thank you, Heidi, for the thoughts. It brings up another one. Of course, single-use plastics and amenities, and it can be done by going to bulk, but to refilling you can. But the most plastics that are single-use are in water. And as you already said, you did away with the single bottles. That's, I see many hotels in Europe where the awareness of these type of things amongst consumers is simply a little more progressed than it is here. I see many hotels moving to water dispensers in the reception area. Really beautifully done, beautiful water dispensers. And, as a gift, and you can do this because you're a very high-end hotel, as a gift, they give people a water bottle with their name on it, with their branding on it. It's something to remember by. You've had a wonderful stay at our place and you take something home. They're going to take something from the room anyway, so they might as well take something you give them. And, on your bill at the end, you have a resort fee, okay, included in there. So there's wonderful things you can do. And the water coming out of these dispensers, if you choose the right one, can actually be a lot better. And now you're in a beautiful area, Napa Valley. People care about drinking in your area. Now, maybe not all water, but water-based stuff at least. So there are wonderful opportunities here to play. I like it.
But we can't have wine coming out of a box. I just refuse that.
Yeah, no, probably not.
Wonderful. Thank you. Thank you so much. All right. The next question I have, we've touched on just slightly, but I'd like to dive a little deeper into, and it's about how domestic sourcing can contribute to both sustainability and profitability for our hotels.
I'll jump in on that initially, and I think that again, as we see the evolution of the demographics of our traveler, we actually see that expectation being set for us. Oftentimes it was consistency regardless of where they were traveling to, and today, especially in the younger generations, they actually want to experience life as a local. They want to feel the place and be a part of the place that they're staying, and it's very important to them to understand what that means in a way of food, in a way of living, in a way of the product that is being used and consumed. So we actually we created a program around it's called Welcome to Our World, and then each hotel has their own story that they share with the guests. What do they want to be known for? And they put out, at the actually prior to arrival, here's what to expect when you come to this property, and making it its own unique experience based on the community that they are in. So and that's very important to people today. That yes, they're going to travel to Tokyo and Paris and New York and so on, but also going to Napa Valley, going to Pattaya, going to these different markets outside of the normal beaten path. They want to really understand what that community is like, and for hotels to use that to their benefit.
If I may, so thanks, Ron. I liked it, and this ties into this idea that you brought up before. Your landscaping needs to be local, because you'll save water. How simple can it be? Actually, the local sourcing is the easiest way to make sustainability profitable. Think about this for a minute. Most hotels in the United States have a shampoo in the shower that comes from China. Now, a shampoo contains, if you have a cheap one, up to 90% water. So somebody in China puts 90% water into a bottle, puts it into a truck on a ship, ships it across 2 oceans, and then you end up having it in your shower. Think of the CO2 footprint of that bottle. It's horrible. Now, it's difficult to calculate these CO2 footprints, and let's not go there. But anybody with a little bit of logic in the mind can imagine that it's probably a better idea to make that shampoo bottle in America. Besides all the quality stuff. So again, just like the landscaping example that Ron brought up, sourcing local is almost always a more sustainable and more profitable option.
And fresh is better.
Minor detail, yes.
And you're offsetting, a massive amount of shipping costs coming from China, especially if you get in a bind and have to airship things. That can be, pretty expensive. You throw in the duties, all of those different things, plus the length of time. Domestic sourcing, if you're able to create economies of scale, you're able to really reduce shipping costs, emissions, and length of time, your time waiting for these products as well.
Great, thank you. Thank you. All right, so the next question I have is a little bit more general. And just looking for some stories or some examples of hotels that have implemented sustainable practices and seen that positive impact on the bottom line.
Sure. So, oh, sorry. At Nemacolin, we were able to do quite a few things that were able to positively impact the bottom line. We were shipping out waste vegetable oil and paying to have somebody pick it up, for instance. So we were able to implement a practice where we're able to recycle that into biodiesel and actually create a revenue stream from the 7,000 plus gallons produced out of the restaurants each year. The COPIA program actually created over $200,000 in tax credit or tax deductions through donations last year, while simultaneously reducing the amount of waste we were sending out to the landfill. And then another one would be just putting on-site solar. So we were able to put on-site solar on one of our hotels, which was able to offset a portion of the energy consumption for the resort. Not a ton, but there are additional plans for this coming year to implement additional solar infrastructure over the auxiliary buildings, so like the engineering building, the laundry building, things of that nature that are literally just warehouses, which would offset about almost 10% of the energy consumption for the resort.
I'll jump in here. A little different approach to it. I was able to sit down with a group of travel planners just a few months ago and really understand their expectations as it relates to sustainability in hotel operations. And I was, while I always recognize, and we see today where RFPs ask questions about sustainability efforts at a hotel and even get into some more detail rather than just, yes, we have them. But I was really surprised to hear the restrictions or demands their customer, meaning the corporations that are booking travel through American Express Travel, BCD Travel, and the like, even Cvent, to say, you don't understand that these, because of regulation, they have restrictions on what hotels they can book based on the answers to those questions. So it took this to a different level of conversation for us to say it's not just about attracting additional business to the hotels because we know that millennials and Gen XYZ prefer that and use that in their decision making, but it's really about maintaining the guests that you already have. And if you don't implement these practices, they will go to another hotel or brand that does have these requirements in place. So critically important to say we need to put a fence around the customers we have and continue to be able to have them visit our properties more than just, hey, if we do these practices, we'll attract new customers. And it was very interesting down to, I'm sorry, my budget, I'm running out of dollars for non-sustainable travel, which includes airline and meetings and everything that ties along with that. But I don't have enough left in my budget for a hotel that's not sustainable to a certain level. So I'm going to have to choose a different hotel for this actual meeting, which was quite surprising to me.
So actually, Ron, that really sort of transitions me into the next question here, and it was about actually communicating with our stakeholders and, particularly our guests here. So often hotels are doing really great work in sustainability, but they don't really talk about it, or it's not accessible to outsiders here. And, what strategies can hotels employ to really effectively communicate their sustainability efforts to guests and their stakeholders and increase that brand value?
Gene, if I may, to your before having the people from hotels answer this question, if I may hook on to that last question that you asked, examples of sustainable profitability in hotels. I was waiting until Heidi was going to say something, but then she decided not to. Profitable sustainability is why our company exists. Because our company was founded somewhere in the 70s by a crazy German entrepreneur who had a crazy German engineer who had an idea, namely, instead of having a bottle of shampoo in your bathroom as we know it, he turned the bottle around and then had an opening on the bottom, and you had to press so you could wash yourself. So stuff would come out and you could wash yourself. He called it press and wash. And the idea was so that you weren't going to throw some product away if you had a new bottle, because it all comes out at the bottom. So it's really empty before you throw it away. So the idea was a packaging innovation that doesn't waste any product anymore. And if you don't waste product, that's a sustainable idea. So in our companies, this is anchored. So if you ask for a hotel experience where sustainability is profitable, we probably have 100,000 experiences of this. But they're not so varied as the one that Ron and Heidi can mention. We just do one thing. Thank you.
Great. Heidi, anything to add?
No, I was going to really second what Ron and Brett were talking about too, in terms of quantifying the measurables and the investment. And I think that can be a story that is harder to tell for hotels to existing consumers and also to new consumers. It's a harder story. And I think that right now the industry is struggling with some of the greenwashing conversations that are happening for those organizations that are really trying to do the right thing. And when we're on, all of us are heavily involved in sustainability in our different areas. And I think the conversations continue to bring up the fact that we as an industry haven't really provided the tools to the customers that are consistent across both cities or brands. And that is difficult. For the customer, if they're deciding between Eco Green Leaf program that, a third party like an Expedia uses, or Booking.com uses a different set of questions, AAA uses a different set of questions, Michelin uses a different set of questions. And so I think there is a lot of interest right now for those that really care about the environment in really determining the value of the different measurements and the tools that we use. And I think there is something to be said for both the fiscal impact and measurables, which would make the business decision very easy, but also what is your reduction on the footprint? For example, what Hans was saying, from origination to the end. And that's a difficult story to tell. Schools have a hard time explaining it. There are universities that are teaching people and still pushing into this industry in terms of coming up with a standard form of measurement. And I think it is a hard story to tell. I could tell a wonderful story to a guest that says, we have a program where we recycle our wine bottles, but it's hard to quantify that number. What is that actual impact and how many would have been recycled anyway, for example? It's much easier to say, we save $25,000 a year and we don't use single-use plastics for water in the guest rooms. And so those kinds of things, just kind of trying to define that. I think that people that really care in the industry and that are doing some testing will be able to share with the rest of us, and having conversations like these are really important with our customers and with each other. And right now we're testing, for example, the single-use packaging in the mini bar concept. And I think this has been a conversation the industry's been having, and we haven't found the right answer yet. I don't think there is a brand currently that's found a solution around mini bar that is less food waste, because most mini bar items are thrown away every 60 days, which is a tremendous amount of food waste. And the consumer still wants something to eat in the guest room that doesn't require human interaction. And so we continue to investigate that. So I think that's something that we haven't resolved yet. I think that we need to continue to put some effort behind communicating to the consumers individually and to corporations that are looking to make an impact with their travel, what the measurement should be. So
Yeah,
I think
I
that's
think Heidi,
the question for all of us.
yeah, and I think that's a really important topic that you bring up. We've got hotels in over 100 countries around the world. So what we have identified is that we use the GSTC, the Global Sustainability Tourism Council, as kind of the benchmark for all programs, and say that if they are GSTC certified, then to us that's at least begins the discussion around an acceptable level of requirements within a hotel. In US and Canada, Green Key Global is probably the most recognized, but most importantly, with that, beyond the commitment to doing it, is that again, what corporations and travel industries accept that rating, that then simplifies things for hotels in responding to RFPs and other business. So I think that there's a lot of work to be done. I mean, there's hundreds of certification programs around the world. Everybody has what they think is their own unique mousetrap to it. And we really we're very fragmented, I guess, in our industry approach, and need to pull it together.
This is super interesting. These logos, of course, they facilitate the fact that it's really hard to measure sustainability progress, what Heidi and you are saying, Rod. And that's why these logos exist. But the problem is the logos also facilitate enormous amounts of greenwashing. And in the end, they're marketing, they're branding things. In the end, in many other industries, logos are marketing machines. They have fairly little to do anymore with sustainability. And in the end, I think a hotel or a hotel group needs to do what they genuinely believe in. Instead of trying to live up to somebody else's measures. You genuinely leave, because only that you can sell to your customers. Only that will attract the right type of people. If you're trying to live up to somebody else's standards, you're not going to have a happy life in your hotel. And this is not a unique experience. I was a long time in the chocolate business, where cocoa has all kinds of troubles, and they went through all kinds of logos, and all the logos are disappearing. So this is a phase the hotel industry goes to, but I bet you in 10 years from now, not many of the logos that we see will still be there.
Right, and that does sort of transition us into my earlier question about communications and strategies and ways to effectively communicate a lot of the great work that we're doing, and at the same time enhance brand value, enhance the hotel's value. What thoughts do you have there?
I would, along those lines of our discussion so far, in terms of what Hans is saying too, on the different logos and just communicating and actually pre-arrival process too, and telling the story, to Ron's point, to be able to tell a consumer that maybe has a personal conviction, to be able to connect that to the choice that they're making for their accommodation stay or their other travel purchases. So if they, in their personal life, can see through the logos, and they see, I don't want to use single-use plastics, I don't do that at home anymore, and I want to make a decision, then it's important to call out to the customer, either through your normal advertising and marketing channels, or through social media to say that this is a resort or hotel that doesn't use single-use plastics or is 90% free of them. It's almost impossible, I will tell you, to be 100%. All of us have been trying for decades. Or something else, for example, Brett was mentioning solar panels, to be able to say, you know, our energy is X% provided by renewable resources. And I think every city has their own measurement that comes through to most hotels, where they know when they're purchasing from their utility provider what percentage of that is renewable energy. You know, places internationally like Costa Rica have a 90% renewable energy source for those resorts just from their country, and every city will have their own. I think communicating that for people that are also very interested in energy savings, as well as food waste. And I think that's a piece too. I know, at least in the states where I have worked, it's always interesting in partnering with the state waste removal, because they track that, right? Most of the states, at least in the US, and I imagine countries, Hans, to your point, and globally, have that percentage where they can speak to what amount of waste they divert from landfills. And our hotel currently, and I recommend this to other hotels that are looking at sustainability programs, they can reach out to their waste removal, and it's almost always free or negligible for them to come out and do an audit, which is a very easy service they provide because it helps them, because they have to report out on their landfill, and they will usually spend a day. It takes about a day with 2 or 3 of your leaders in food and beverage or in housekeeping to go through and find the sources for the most amount of waste, for food waste specifically, which is one of the reasons we're taking a look at minibar, just to see where are the opportunities in the processes that hotels have set up to divert more of that into compost and into compostables, and make sure that we have the right containers. And often they're provided complimentary by the cities and states. So I suggest that for those hotels that are interested in implementing sustainability, there's some really small things. And when you're communicating that, when you tell a customer that's dining at your restaurant that we divert 60% of our food waste to compost and away from landfill, or 80% of it, or 90%, depending on where you're going with your goals, I think that does speak to the consumer. We put it on our menus and on our website. And so those are ways to communicate, to answer part of your question, but we also tell that story through social media, and also on the website. Just some examples.
And I think when you look at the website, you know, in particular, I think it's key that you understand that some people want to go down that rabbit hole and they want to go and learn as much about sustainability as possible. And then there's other guests that, you know, they may want to just kind of stick their toe in the water. So I think, you know, in developing a website, I think it's key that you're able to convey just the broad overarching kind of status of a particular project or initiative, but then if somebody wants to go into it deeper, they can learn a lot more about it. And even potentially, you know, we get a lot of group corporate clientele, and they may want to implement one of those initiatives at their own corporation. So having the ability to actually even link all the way to, say, Copia or Winnow or a project like that, so that they can find that information out for their own corporations as well, I think is key.
I think this whole idea gives smaller groups or smaller hotels a competitive edge versus the larger groups at the measurement of sustainability, whatever measure you choose. Because in larger groups, of course, there's all kinds of reporting going on, lots. And everybody always complains there's too much. And most of that reporting has to do with business measures. And so sustainability measure is all the way at the end. Whereas if you're a smaller group, you do the same thing, but the reporting is a lot simpler in comparison. So you can focus on choosing 2 or 3 things that you really care about. And communicating that with the people who are there. You can make much more of an impact on your current guest if you're a smaller group and, you know, genuinely care than if you have to do something that headquarters tells you to do. So you understand both situations, but I think in communicating about sustainability, small groups have a major competitive edge if they would throw themselves into it.
Yeah, I think you're absolutely right with that, and I think that again to Heidi's point earlier is that just be authentic to what you are. Don't say your hotel is 100% sustainable because it's not, and customers staying at the property will look for that, and not because they're out just looking for it, but if there's evidence in the practices, the experience that don't support what you tout or say you are, they see through that. And so I think the authenticity of the stay and where you are in the process is great to communicate. And I would say that I think a lot of the guests in hotels uh, just give credit for the fact that it's being worked on. It's an important aspect of the hotel operation, and they see it in some parts of the stay, but not all today.
And this whole idea about, I totally agree with that. But and we talk here in this group about measures for sustainability. But the word doesn't mean a thing, and it gets misused all the time. Now, the example that both you, Ron and Heidi, bring up about food waste is a wonderful way that small groups can use, because if indeed you say you pick up the plate that isn't totally finished, and you said instead of saying I'm sorry you didn't like it, or was everything to your wish, you'll ask that question. You could also say thank you for your contribution. We're going to bring this to this and this place where it's being put to good use. And you could do something with this if you genuinely believe this. Make a marketing point out of the fact that they don't eat their food. And there's lots of stuff you can do here, and fun stuff too. And that's a lot more concrete than talking about sustainability, because nobody knows what that means.
Well, and as Gene opened up the session in the introduction, this whole initiative is around ESG, as recognized around the world, environmental, social governance. Well, that's a government program. That's a government acronym. So it was actually the reason we changed ours to EPC here at World Hotels and BWH Hotels. It stands for Earth, People, and Community. So it's more personalized approach into what are we really trying to do? We're trying to save the earth. We're trying to work with people and take care of people and the communities that they work in. So we got to, and we know in some parts of the world it's political using ESG. So we just said, you know what, this isn't about any of that. This is about what's most important, and it's the earth, the people, and the community. So that's why our name is a little bit different.
That's great. Thank you. That was a great round of information there as well. This one's a little bit more of a general question, but I'd like just to put out there the question about how hotels can engage guests in sustainability efforts without compromising the luxury experience. Having them participate in part of the process of sustainability within the property.
Well, I think as people try to eliminate plastic water bottles, that's a key one right there. At both Nemacolin and Ocean House, we eliminated plastic water bottles in favor of reusable aluminum bottles that guests could take as a gift. They were branded. In the case of Ocean House, which is a much smaller property, we installed 5 refill stations. At Nemacolin, we've installed 55 refill stations throughout the acreage, both interior and exterior, so that every single public space on property has filtered water easily accessible for guests. All associates are trained on where those locations are. And then we have the butler service actually talk about that program with the guest upon arrival. When they escort them to the guest room, they show them where the closest refill station is to their guest room, talk about the program, and try to create buy-in for them.
And we have, I will suggest too that we talk a little bit about, and Ron mentioned too, people and community. And I think, Brett, to your point, to putting that visibility in front of the guest, we have a program at the hotel that allows guests to donate $1 per night to a local program. And that is the opportunity for us to talk about it with them. That is not, it's not in their face necessarily. For example, when you're talking about people that want to deep dive into sustainability, they'll have a much broader conversation about who the organization is and what they do. And we have information. And I think, and in this case, we partnered with someone that has sustainable transportation options in Napa Valley. And specifically, those that maybe aren't as interested in sustainability or that's not of interest to them, that conversation is very short and minimal, and they can opt out, obviously. Most consumers opt in because it is a wonderful program, and I think sustainability is on most people's minds these days. And so it's a interesting way to communicate that, both on a personal level, because the people at the hotel feel very strongly about supporting that organization, which is why it was chosen. And also it's local to us, so it's very in close proximity to the resort. So that's another way too to kind of help with that message and supporting sustainability.
Yeah, and recognize that all countries aren't created equal as it relates to this. And I just got back from Stockholm a couple months ago. Everything in Stockholm was sustainable. I didn't see a gas car there. Everything was electric. I mean, everything was, and that's the way of they do business today. But then you go to APAC and they don't even know what the word is in some of the countries. So it is an evolution. And to Hans's earlier point is that for bigger companies, it's harder to get that message across because it is going to be different depending on where you travel. And unless they implement the glass bottle program that Heidi has, in Asia, you have to have plastic water bottles because you can't drink the water. So it is an evolution that, over time we'll get there, and we're implementing those solutions. But and I think customers recognize that. It doesn't make them any happier that different countries aren't there yet. But it is a huge initiative for the industry to get our arms around this and move forward.
I think that's a nice observation, of course, that not all countries are at the same level of this. I come from the Netherlands, that's like Stockholm, and it's a beautiful source of inspiration. If you are interested in sustainability, and I think we should all be interested in sustainability, because when it's genuine and authentic, it is extremely effective marketing. And of course, in America, we use the word marketing and branding very often to push something and to be salesy and all of that. But if you genuinely implement only a few sustainability projects that actually make a difference to your hotel and communicate about it, and if then everybody in your hotel is authentic and genuine about it, and then customers will automatically notice and get on board. You also get the right customers then. I think it's a magnificent chance to talk about something that not many people can talk about if you're genuine about it.
All right. Well, this has been an amazing conversation, just an amazing conversation. I'd like to thank our panelists for your wonderful insights, all this great information, and your contributions to this event today. To close, we'd like to thank you all for joining us for the International Luxury Hotel Association's webinar series. And I'd like to thank our sponsor again, ILHA Cosmetics. If you found the webinar to be valuable, please do share the recording. Recordings of past webinars can be found at the ILHA's website, ilha.org, under events. Thank you all again. Have a great